Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to talk about probably what I would say is one of the best salad crops you can possibly grow, and that's Perennial Rocket. So this is what a Perennial Rocket looks like. This is a well-established plant. As you can see, it's quite a size now. So Perennial Rocket differs quite a bit to the normal rocket you would grow as a salad. Taste-wise, I find them very similar. Not a huge amount of difference. The leaves are a little bit different though. You can see they're quite a narrow leaf on this one. Now you can get the varieties of the annual rocket which also have narrow leaves, but these just tend to have a slightly narrower leaf. It also does depend on the time of year. Earlier in spring you get leaves which are a little bit more like the normal rocket. You can see some of them down here where they're not as fine and they're a bit thicker. So you do actually get a nicer crop of leaves earlier in the year, and when they start flowering they go like this. But the way that they really differ from the normal type of rocket is they are perennial. So with most rocket that you would grow in the garden, you would sow the seeds, you get a good harvest of leaves for maybe a few weeks, but then after a month or two the plant goes to flower, puts all its energy into flowering. The leaves become really bitter and not very tasty. When it goes into flowering it doesn't grow any more leaves and the plant finishes, and then you have to re-sow the plant, start the whole process again. So you don't get such a big harvest, you have to be constantly re-sowing. With the perennial plant, it's just going to keep growing. Even when it goes to flower like it is now, it will still grow lots of leaves. They'll just be a bit finer, maybe a bit more peppery, but still perfectly edible. And all you need to do is keep cutting the flower heads off. So you can see here we've got some larger flower heads coming up there. I can just cut that back with a pair of secateurs quite low down, and then they will just send up some more flower heads, some more leaves, and keep cropping the whole summer long. Now this is also fully hardy as well, so it can handle quite low winter temperatures, probably -10, something like that. It will be just fine, so it will keep regrowing year after year. This plant is actually 3 years old now, and we've transplanted it several times, and although it looks like a massive patch of rocket, it is actually just one individual plant. Now it might be hard to sow the base of the roots, but it's down there somewhere. As you can kind of see as I'm rocking it, it's just all coming from one point. And you can maybe see a large stem at the base there, which is the main original stem, and it just keeps branching, keeps growing, grows really great. Also doesn't seem to suffer too much from slugs and other pests. I think that really peppery spicy taste that it has puts off most pests, and even if it does get stressed, unlike the other rocket which goes to seed and dies, if it goes to seed it will keep growing and be absolutely fine. Probably the best perennial salad crop you can grow. It just produces so abundantly. Just one plant like this, it's probably perfect for a family. In its first year or two it might not be big enough for one family, but once you get an established mature plant like this, you can keep cropping it so much that one family can easily have enough rocket for one plant. And the more that you crop it, the more it will encourage it to grow leaves. If you don't crop it at all, you get a big plant and you get a lot of flowers, but the more you cut it back, the more it will grow leaves and the more of a harvest you'll get. So it will actually do really well, as long as you don't take off every single leaf, because then it will suffer. So what I'll do now is I will show you a bit more on the care side of things. I'll show you a plant in my garden which I purposely left unpruned for a long time. This plant we prune back hard once a year around about the winter time to reinvigorate it, to grow lots of fresh shoots in spring and stop it from getting too big and woody. But I'll show you some that I've got in my garden which I purposely left to get large and woody, and show you what they look like when they're flowering and gone a bit over, and how to prune them back, reinvigorate them and get them to crop again year after year. So this is an example of what a perennial rocket would look like when it's gone over a little bit and it's ready for pruning. So you can see at the top here we've got quite long flower shoots. This one isn't flowering too much, but sometimes you might get flowers forming on every single stem. We've also got seed heads forming down here. Now this is something you definitely want to watch out for. If you get seed heads forming, what that means is the energy from the plant is all going into the seeds. This will severely weaken the plant. The plant will put on a lot less growth into its leaves and it'll just become very stunted, and you'll just get all the energy going into the seeds. So what you want to do is cut any seeds that you see, definitely cut them off, but before the seeds form you're best cutting off any of the flower spikes first. That will stop any of the seed heads from forming. And if you get to the state where your plant looks like this is normally what a plant looks like towards the end of the summer, where it's had a whole season's growth, or if it hasn't been pruned much over the summer, you get this very long leggy growth. You get a lot of bare stem towards the bottom, you get small sparse leaves towards the top. You see a lot of these dead yellowing leaves on the side. If the leaves start to go yellow lower down, that's normally a sign that it hasn't got enough nitrogen. And so if you do get to this stage, the best thing to do is give it a really hard cut back and encourage it to resprout. So as long as you leave about 2 or 3 inches, or about 5 to 15 centimeters of stem at the base, you normally can't cut back too hard. So give it a really hard trim. That will just put the plant into shock. It will then react by growing lots of new leaves, and those leaves will be nice and fresh, and it will probably stay growing leaves for several months until it tries to flower again. So I'm just going to go ahead now. You can use secateurs or scissors, ideally secateurs, because when they're at this stage the stems do get quite woody, and just give the whole thing a good cut back. Now it might seem a bit drastic, but this is what the plant needs to be reinvigorated. Now what will happen is you can see all these little sections towards the bottom here, all these little leaf scars along the stems. Along all those leaf scars is where the new growth will appear from. But there's something you can do to really encourage this new growth to come through much more vigorously and much fresher, and that is to give it a high nitrogen feed. So a balanced feed will still work. It will put on strong growth, but if you give it a feed that's very high in nitrogen, then what will happen is the leaves will be extra large, extra fleshy and extra tender. So you can either give it a pure nitrogen feed or just give it a feed that's higher in nitrogen than it is in the other nutrients, and that will just help it to really grow on nicely. Leave it in a sunny position, make sure it's well watered, but as you cut all the leaves off, what you'll find is it won't dry out as quickly because it's not needing much water, as it's the leaves that used up the water and evaporate the water. So make sure you don't have it overwatered. If you have it in a pot like this, allow any excess water to flow out. You don't want it to get waterlogged, but just make sure it doesn't dry out. And it might be a bit slow at first. You might be 2 or 3 weeks before you notice anything, but once you start noticing some new growth towards the bottom, you'll notice that growth will be quite slow at first, but after a few weeks it will start to grow really fast and you'll get a really nice healthy plant again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 2 of these plants, one in a similar condition to how this one was before I pruned it, very leggy, in desperate needing of pruning, not many fresh leaves on it. I'll leave that one unpruned to show you what happens if you don't prune it, and with this one here I'll be giving this plant the nitrogen feed, and you'll see the difference between this one and the other one and how well it responds and how lush your growth will become. So it's just 1 month later, and as you can see the plant is looking much better. It's a nice compact plant, lots of lush leaves, really healthy, and just loads and loads of leaves so you can have lots of nice salad. Now this will remain in this state for quite a long time if you keep harvesting the leaves. You can see there's a couple of shoots like this one here which is just starting to get a bit taller. If I was to cut that back, what it does is it encourages the plant to send up more shoots from the base, and it'll keep this nice bushy appearance for much longer. So what I'll do now is I'll take it away from the camera, put it further back. I'll show you 2 other plants which have been left in the same pot size as this one was, just to give an example of what this one would look like now if I hadn't have done that prune and that feeding regime. So as you can see, there's this huge difference between the 3 plants, and they're actually in exactly the same size pot. So the only difference was that this one was pruned hard and then it was fed. You can see the other ones, they've actually got worse than this one was a month ago because they continue to grow taller and leggier. What's happening is there's really not much nutrients for them, so they're just getting woodier, and you can see the leaves are small. They're going to be very bitter and not very tasty, and they're very pale in colour, and it's not going to get much harvest off it. So as you can see, it makes a dramatic difference giving it a prune and giving it a feed. So whenever your rocket becomes a bit leggy, that's all you need to do, and it will respond very well to it and come back much stronger and healthier within a few weeks. And you can actually do this pretty much at any time of year. The rocket isn't too sensitive to the time of year that you do it, so you can just do this pretty much whenever you need to. So that's all for this video. I just wanted to show you the Perennial Rocket, a fantastic salad crop to grow in the garden. Probably one of the best ones you can get because it will just constantly give you more and more healthy leaves and nice tasting leaves for your salads. And it's the fact that it lives year after year. All you need to do to regenerate it is to cut it down hard. It will grow back and give you lots of fresh leaves. And unlike the normal kind of rocket which dies after flowering, this one will just keep going, and you can keep this for multiple years and you won't have to buy plants and sow new seeds year after year.